Hello everyone, I am Dr. Ruchi Mishra, Head School of Languages. Today I am going to throw some light on the famous drama She Stoops to Conquer, written by Oliver Goldsmith. She Stoops to Conquer has another name, it's called Mistakes of a Night, and it's a very famous comedy drama written by Oliver Goldsmith. It was basically written in 1771 and it was staged in theatre in 1773. It's a very famous drama written by Oliver Goldsmith. She Stoops to Conquer is basically a comedy, and it brought into the forefront the basic form of comedy, which was against the prevalent sentimental comedy existing in the 18th century England. Oliver Goldsmith, the writer of this drama, was basically an Irish man. He was an Irish playwright, poet, and dramatist. And he was writing in the neoclassical age or the Augustan age during the time when realism had come into the forefront and people used to give less attention to imagination. Oliver Goldsmith had his contemporaries as Samuel Johnson and Jean Rousseau, and he was writing basically touching the common man, the problems of the common man. The main characters in the play are Mr. and Mrs. Hardcastle, Kate Hardcastle, Tony Lumpkin, and Marlowe, Hastings, and Constance Neville. Now, the story belongs to basically Mr. and Mrs. Hardcastle, who are living in a remote area suburban to the city of London. They were living very near to the London city. Mr. Hardcastle was a very traditional man. He had his whole thinking and he never wanted to accept the new fashion or the new technologies which were prevalent during that time. He was a very old-fashioned man. And he had his daughter, who is the heroine of the play, Kate Hardcastle. She was a very educated, sensible, modern girl who had got education in London. They also had a son, Tony Lumpkin. Now, Tony Lumpkin was the son of Mrs. Hardcastle's previous marriage. When Mrs. Hardcastle was married to someone else, she had a son, Tony Lumpkin, and when she married again, then she married to Mr. Hardcastle, and then they had a daughter, Kate. Tony Lumpkin is a very spoiled brat who is spoiled by his mother, who spends his time drinking and moving around. He's not at all serious in his life. Whereas Kate Hardcastle is a very sincere girl who is very close to her father and a very important character in this story, and she's also the mouthpiece of Oliver Goldsmith. Now, she always respects her father, and just to give respect to her father, she wears traditional clothes. She does not move out of the house much, but in the evenings when she goes out, she dresses up in a modern way. So she is able to strike a balance between her father's feelings and her own desires, and a very mature girl in the play. And the title, She Stoops to Conquer, is actually applicable for Kate only. So that we will come to know in the story as we move ahead. Now, apart from these four members, there is one more member living in the family who is Constance Neville. Now, Constance Neville is a niece of Mrs. Hardcastle, and she's being taken care of Mrs. Hardcastle. She has some jewelry, and this jewelry is kept with Mrs. Hardcastle. And it was the rule at that time that when she gets married to somebody, then only the jewelry will be handed over to her. Now, Mrs. Hardcastle wants Tony Lumpkin, her son, to get married to this niece of hers, that is Constance Neville. But Tony was not interested in getting married to Constance Neville, and even Neville was not interested because she was interested in another man in her life who was Hastings. So she wanted to get married to another man. Now, Kate is a very beautiful, sensible girl. Mr. Hardcastle decides that he will arrange a wedding for Kate, and he wants Kate to get married to one of his friend's son. Now, Mr. Hardcastle has a friend, Sir Charles Marlowe, and Mr. Hardcastle wants his son to get married to Kate. So, he invites Sir Charles Marlowe's son, Marlowe, to come to this place of where Mr. and Mrs. Hardcastle are living and have a look at Kate, and so that they can move ahead with the marriage proposal. Now, Marlowe and his friend Hastings, they move towards the town. As they are approaching the house of Hardcastle, they get confused as which is the right way or which is the right direction to move to their house. And so in the meanwhile, in between, they stop at a restaurant or at a hotel. And in that restaurant, Tony was sitting there and he was, drinking. And Tony's character is such that he is not very close with his stepfather, Mr. Hardcastle. And he is always looking for opportunities to bring about some trouble in the Hardcastle house. And one more thing about Tony is that Tony is getting money from his father, and his father has said that he's going to give money to Tony as a pocket money till he turns 18. And Mrs. Hardcastle had a blind love for Tony, and so she hides this fact that Tony had actually turned 18. Tony had attained the age of 18, and still he was getting pocket money from his father. So Mrs. Hardcastle had basically spoiled her son, and he was not doing anything serious in his life. Now, as these two men, Marlowe and Hastings, are approaching this Hardcastle house, they stop nearby, and Tony recognizes this fact that these two people are going to Mr. Hardcastle's house. So he stops them and says that you are not going in the right direction. That is not Mr. Hardcastle's house, but you can go and stay there for a night, because that is actually a hotel. And when you go to that hotel, the owner of the hotel will pretend as if it's his own house, and he will be very nice to you, but it is actually a hotel or an inn. So Marlowe and Hastings, these two men, they move toward the Hardcastle house thinking that it is actually a hotel. And when they meet Mr. Hardcastle, they behave, especially Marlowe behaves very rudely with Mr. Hardcastle, and he is always, he asks Mr. Hardcastle what is the rate for spending one night or 2 nights. And on the contrary, Mr. Hardcastle is thinking that he is the prospective groom, for his daughter. So he's very taken aback, and he's very surprised at the behavior of Marlowe as to how he's behaving, and in spite of the fact that he is the son of his dear friend. But still he is very hospitable. And Kate also gets a chance to meet Marlowe, but Kate is dressed up in a very fashionable manner, like a modern girl. And at that time she meets Marlowe, and Marlowe also has a unique character. And one thing which is to be noted here, that Marlowe is very conscious with women who are of the same status as he is. So he gets comfortable only with those girls or with those women who are below his status, who are maybe poor or not very educated. But when a girl comes in front of him who is of the same status or of the higher status, he gets very conscious, he has a sort of a complex, and he's not able to behave normally. So Marlowe, when he meets Kate, as she's dressed up like a modern girl, so Marlowe is not able to converse with her properly. And at the same time, Mr. Hardcastle is upset with his behavior. So this is the scene taking place between Marlowe and Kate. Now another thing which is important is another track of the story is about Constance Neville, the niece, and her boyfriend. Now the person who has accompanied Marlowe, the person who has come along with Marlowe, is George Hastings, and he is actually the man whom Neville is interested in. So when Neville sees this man, that she is surprised, and he is also surprised to see her. And Neville tells this friend of Marlowe, Hastings, that this is not a restaurant or a hotel, but is actually the house of Mr. and Mrs. Hardcastle. And she tells him that my jewelry is with Mrs. Hardcastle, and I want to get that jewelry so that I can go away from this house and marry George Hastings. So George Hastings is very happy to see her, but at the same time he's thinking of how to get the jewelry from Mrs. Hardcastle so that they can elope from their place and get married. And he decides not to tell Marlowe that this is actually not a restaurant or a hotel, but it is the house of Mr. Hardcastle, because he thinks that Marlowe will suddenly, move away from that place. And all these events are happening in one night. That is why the name of the play was Mistakes of a Night. Now this was the track going on with Neville and Hastings. Now another thing is that Tony Lumpkin also he does not like his stepfather, and he is also interested in a girl who was working in a bar, so he wants to get married to that bar girl. Now Hastings decides to make a plan to get the jewelry back from Mrs. Hardcastle. So he befriends Tony. He asks Tony that since you don't want to get married to Constantinople, so you please help me out and get that jewelry from Mrs. Hardcastle, so that I can get married to her and I can go away from that place. So Tony decides to help them, and he steals the jewelry from Mrs. Hardcastle's closet, and then he gives it back to Hastings. Now Hastings, thinking that it is a night time and it is not safe to keep the jewelry with him, so he hands over the jewelry to Marlowe, thinking that Marlowe will keep it safely for some time. And Marlowe, on the other hand, thinks that this place is not safe, so I should keep the jewelry with the owner of this hotel, that is Mrs. Hardcastle. So Marlowe returns the jewelry back to Mrs. Hardcastle. So jewelry was stolen from that place is actually comes back to Mrs. Hardcastle again. So this whole cycle goes in this whole confusion. Constance Neville and Hastings' plans are crushed of getting the jewelry and running away. But still they decide to wait for some time so that they can get married. Now in the meanwhile, Mr. Hardcastle, who is very upset with Marlowe's behavior, decides to call his father and tell him that his son has been behaving very rudely. And but at the same time, this girl Kate, she develops a liking for Marlowe, and she wanted to prove to the world that Marlowe is not the man that he is actually showing himself to be. There is some real side of it, and the world should know the real side. So when the father of Marlowe comes, Sir Charles Marlowe, when he comes, so she tells Mr. Hardcastle and this person, his father, Marlowe's father, to stay behind the curtain and listen to the conversation that she is going to have with Marlowe. So they stay behind the curtain. Now, actually, Kate started meeting Marlowe as a very poor girl, because she realizes this fact that he is comfortable with girls who are of lower status. So she started meeting Marlowe dressed up as a very poor ordinary girl, and she tells him that I live in this restaurant, in this hotel as a poor girl. And he immediately develops a liking for her too, and he is comfortable in her company, and both start liking each other. Now when father of Marlowe comes and when Mr. Hardcastle, they are standing behind the curtain, at that time Kate discloses this fact to Marlowe that actually she is not a very poor girl. Her father is of similar status as Mr. Hardcastle. So, but Marlowe is so much impressed by her and by her beauty that he says, no matter what, to which class you belong to, I'll still marry you. I want to marry you. I like you as a girl. But at the same time, I have to keep the word which my father has kept. And my father wants me to get married to a girl who is the daughter of his friend. So, I have to, respect my father as well, in spite of the fact that I like you. So two things appear here in front of the audiences about Marlowe, that he respects his father. Secondly, the class status which he was conscious of is the complex which he had. He is able to remove that complex, and irrespective of the status, he starts liking the girl. So when Mr. Hardcastle and Marlowe's father hear this conversation, they get really impressed, and they decide that actually Marlowe is a good person, and they decide to get married with Marlowe and Kate should get married. That's what they decide. So this couple is moving towards a happy ending. Now Neville and Hastings, now they also wanted to get married. Tony Lumpkin, who was upset with his father, who's a stepfather. Now Tony Lumpkin's father, Mr. Hardcastle, tells him that you have actually attained the age of 18 and you should no longer be getting the pocket money from your father. And since you have attained the age of 18, you should behave in a responsible manner, and this fact has been hidden from you by your mother. So he comes to know the truth. And when he comes to know the truth, his eyes are open and he realizes that his mother has been pampering and spoiling him, and his stepfather, whom he always hated, is actually his well-wisher and has disclosed the real fact in front of him. So he also understands the situation, and just to make his mother angry and just to make his mother realize, he boards a chariot. He takes his mother along on a chariot and goes around the house, circling the house again and again and again. And maybe his mother realizes his mistakes, and then she hands over the jewelry also of Constance Neville to back to her so that she can get married to Hastings. And at the same time, Tony Lumpkin also decides to get married to a bar girl. So we have towards the end of the play 3 couples coming up and they get happily married. Now, this play of Oliver Goldsmith has a happy ending and it has very light moments. There are no heavy moments in the play, so you can just go through it very nicely. Now, the messages that we get or the lessons that we learn from this play, She Stoops to Conquer, the very title, She Stoops to Conquer, is applicable to the heroine of the drama, Kate Hardcastle. The word stoops means to bend down, and to conquer is to win over. So, this girl, Kate Hardcastle, bends down or becomes flexible or changes, or we can say makes adjustments to win over the man she loves and even to win over the respect of her father and people around. So this is the lesson that we are going to get, that Kate is said to be the mouthpiece of Oliver Goldsmith, that if we make little adjustments in our life, if we bend down a little bit in our relationship, we can win over the hearts of people. So if you want to win over the hearts of people, if you want to win over in relationships, we have to make little adjustments. We have to be flexible in our attitude, as Kate was in the case of her father. And as her father wanted to dress up, so she used to dress up like him. At the same time, Marlowe, the man in her life, he was very close to girls, or he was not comfortable with girls who were dressed up fashionably, so she changes her attire for him as well. Second important lesson is that class and caste distinctions do not play any role in relationships. So if you have a liking for someone, if you respect someone, the class to which he belongs, to the caste to which he belongs, does not make any difference at all. And the third important message is the truth always wins in the end, and the truth is able to clear out all the misunderstandings. So Tony Lumpkin is a character who's initially a very spoiled brat, comes out as a good man when he comes to know the truth which his stepfather tells him. So truth is always winning in the end and clearing away the misunderstandings. And thirdly, a very important thing is that positivity is in the environment when you have happy endings. So when you read a play like She Stoops to Conquer, you get a very positive feeling because it has a very good ending, and all throughout the play it has very light moments. So I think this video has been very informative for you regarding this play She Stoops to Conquer. And if you just watch, there are so many times movies are made and there are plays available, there are YouTube videos available on it, you can watch it as well. And hope you enjoy the play. Thank you for watching. God bless.